ready? Welcome, everyone, to the Ethical Humanist Society of Chicago, established in 1882 as the Society for Ethical Culture. My name is Kara Malenfant. I'm a member of EHS, and I will be your moderator for today's session, which is called Building a Firewall to Safeguard Democracy. Before I introduce our speaker, I'm going to invite Rachel Savage up to offer a brief reading.
In 2023, the World Humanist Congress adopted an official declaration on democracy and affirmed the following. 1. Democracy is a universal fundamental value that is essential to the realization of humanist principles worldwide. 2. Democracy must be broadly inclusive, transparent, accountable, and secular, with institutions and practices that are responsive to the changing needs and aspirations of citizens. 3. Citizens must be empowered, and the right to exercise citizenship must be protected without prejudice. 4. Democracy as a culture must be actively defended against all threats, including those from regimes, movements, and political parties that embrace authoritarian principles, from those with unaccountable economic and social power, and from all other forces that seek to undermine democratic values and institutions. They then went on to say, we commit ourselves to working for a more democratic world. We call on all governments, institutions, and individuals to uphold and protect democratic values as a cornerstone of human dignity, justice, and freedom. We call on all humanists around the world to stand in solidarity with those who are struggling to defend and promote democracy, and to work together to build a world in which democracy flourishes and the dignity and rights of all people are protected.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for helping ground us in what a humanist perspective on democracy is. Very valuable. I think the kids in our Humanist Sunday School program can go ahead and head to your classrooms. So today's program, Building a Firewall to Safeguard Democracy, is one of the programs we have every other week with an outside expert, and our programs address a wide variety of topics, including current events, philosophy, and arts, to name just a few. Today's presentation is very much part of that current events strand. And we'll be hearing from Khadine Bennett, Director of Advocacy and Intergovernmental Affairs with the ACLU of Illinois, about their Building a Firewall campaign, which seeks to ensure that officials do not voluntarily assist in attacks on our civil liberties and our rights. So the ACLU of Illinois is working at every level of government in this state, from the legislature to county boards to city halls, to make sure Illinois remains a place where rights are protected and expanded. As a recognized advocate inside the state capitol, Khadine is responsible for advancing a wide range of issues, from privacy and technology to policing, criminal and juvenile justice, First Amendment, LGBT, and reproductive justice matters. She has drafted a number of pieces of legislation that have been successfully moved to the governor and signed into law, and she regularly testifies in the Illinois House and Senate. Khadine began her ACLU of Illinois career as a legal fellow with the Reproductive Rights Project, and she started her social justice career in the California Bay Area, where she was working for various human rights, juvenile justice, youth development, and reproductive justice organizations. Join me in welcoming Khadine Bennett.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Awesome. And I apologize in advance. So my title, I tell people it's a long-winded way of saying I'm a lawyer lobbyist. So, and I'm used to having to talk to legislators with negative time about things that are very complex. So I tend to talk very fast. So I'm going to try to slow down That is the constant thing. That is my Achilles heel. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here today, not just as somebody who lives in Skokie, to be here in my community talking to folks, but also in this moment of time to see people here showing up. And I've learned about this group, and it just feels like a really good opportunity to be in community during this time. So I appreciate you all being here and the invitation. It was really hard to figure out what to talk about, where to start, because there's so much that's been going on. And so I am going to start with a little bit of what we've seen, and then talk about what folks can do, because I think leaving with the sense of there are things we can do that can make a difference can be really helpful. So around 6 months into the second Trump administration, there was some assessment of, Project 2025. Raise your hand if you've not heard of Project 2025. Okay, great. Like, how much has happened? So according to the data, it was of the 317 objectives that were identified, 116 were done, 63 were in progress. So it was 47% complete. So that's in the first 6 months in office, and we know that each day more and more things are happening. So far, what we've seen has been as bad, and in some cases even worse than expected, because of what has felt like rapid fire onslaught, and that it's intended to distract, terrify, and scare us. There's been an increased disregard for law, custom, and what's within the power of the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of government, and a willingness to abandon democracy. And I say that with the understanding that for many people, folks have not felt that democracy has protected them. They have felt that the rule of law was not always on their side. But even so, it has been a place where we've been trying to achieve a more just and democratic society. But now feeling that all of those gains made people are feeling that they've been eroded. So some of the examples that we've seen is the targeting of vulnerable communities and rolling back anti-discrimination policies. We're seeing this in several ways, including immigration enforcement and policy changes, the rollback of civil rights and anti-discrimination protections, and attacks on trans folks and gender-affirming care. We've seen executive overreach and the unraveling of democratic norms. This administration has worked to further consolidate executive power through the firings and reassignments across federal government, rewarding loyalty through nominations and the creation of new departments, and threatening to revoke federal aid, grants, and loans. We've seen the assertion of Trump's truth. In addition to rhetoric from the administration sowing fear and chaos, we're also seeing the validation of misinformation, the assertion of revisionist history, and a fixation on erasing discussions of race and gender in K-12 schools. And we've seen attacks on free speech. In the wake of the murder of Charlie Kirk, government actors have been calling for people to lose their jobs and livelihoods because they exercise their right to freely express political views that some view as controversial in ways that have been deeply disturbing and undemocratic, including the threat by a Trump administration official recently to bring the weight of the federal government down on what they allege was, quote, a left-wing network that funds and incites violence, unquote, and they were, quote, going to use every resource we have at the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and throughout this government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe again for the American people. Government officials are using terrorism and material support labels to cast stigma and suspicion on people who are exercising their First Amendment rights to engage in political debate. These inflammatory government labels have a chilling effect across the country. The ACLU has long opposed both state and federal domestic terrorism legislation due to concerns about expanding law enforcement powers, which we've seen lead to unjust surveillance, investigation, and prosecution of people who the government doesn't like or those who dissent against government policies, especially communities of color. And that's not to name the most recent late night host vendetta that we've been seeing, and attacks on the press as well. These actions reflect the administration's determination to silence any person or organization that resists his unpopular agenda. That said, the ACLU of Illinois, our partners, fellow advocates, organizations, elected officials, providers of care, organizers, and communities have been pushing back nonstop. The ACLU, our national office, and our affiliates have been thinking about and preparing for this since way before the election. Project 2025 was a roadmap to what a Trump 2 administration would look like, and we took it seriously. We knew that there were lessons learned from the previous administration that could or would result in even more harm than we saw in the first administration. In Illinois, even before the first Trump administration, we've worked hard to create protections in place for things we knew that were going to be a target for folks who were immigrants or undocumented folks, for folks who were seeking reproductive health care broadly, including abortion care, for folks who were LGBT, were seeking gender-affirming care. We've try to have protections in place around privacy issues at the state and local level, surveillance, protections against that, and then fighting back against attempts to limit civil liberties and civil rights. So in that way, for many, I was just at a conference with our affiliates throughout the country, and people see Illinois as like, at least you have like this really protective place. When I'm talking to colleagues in Alabama and Texas and in places where they're not able to use the state legislature or local electeds to have the protections we have. But with those protections, those were all hard-won fights, and they continue to be hard-won fights. So I say that because I think sometimes people are like, our governor's great, we have a supermajority in both chambers, everything's all good. But even with that, I think it's really important for us to continue to push folks, because this is a time where if we're not pushing them, it would be really easy to rest on our laurels. As of 9/11 of this year, the ACLU National Office and our affiliated, our network of affiliates, we've been involved in 166 total legal actions in response to the Trump 2 administration. 83 of those were lawsuits, and 83 were other legal actions like FOIAs, amicus briefs, and agency complaints. One of the cases that we worked on was in response to one of the Trump administration's EOs that was anti-DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and it was around Head Start, targeting Head Start. And we worked with parents' advocacy groups and a coalition of Head Start providers to file a lawsuit to stop the Trump administration's dismantling of Head Start. Part of the concern they shared is the idea that some of these Head Start programs were targeted to certain minority groups of young people. So a program for Black boys between the ages of 3 to 5, like that was considered something that was harmful. And it's resulted in the dismantling of a lot of Head Start agencies, or fear of, if we continue to provide the kind of specific care that we do, will we lose our funding? So as I said before, our partners and communities on the ground are doing community-based organizing and education. They're organizing small community actions and large protests. They're educating their communities, and we're partnering to not just reverse what this administration is attempting to do, we're also committed to working towards a better and stronger democracy that works for all of us. So what can be done and what should we be doing? The first is immigration related. So while the Trump administration's threats to deploy the National Guard in Chicago hasn't happened yet, and I say yet because I think while it hasn't happened, we are on the lookout of, are we one interaction with federal agents away for that being the trigger for Trump to call in the National Guard. But while that's not happened yet, he has made good on his promise of a surge in federal forces via what he calls Operation Blitz. And that's, an authoritarian action that wasn't justified by any emergency, which resulted in an increase of over 200 additional ICE and Customs and Border Patrol agents that have been active in Chicago and surrounding counties. We saw the blueprint of these militaristic immigration enforcement actions in Los Angeles, and we predicted that here in Chicago, we would see ruthless enforcement raids that would go after primarily residents who appear to be non-citizens, individuals and families with deep roots in the community and with no criminal record. And our belief is that they would be targeted for deportation and detention, likely without due process, resulting in families being separated. And we've seen some of those concerns play out. The threat of a surge of federal forces and the possibility of sending the National Guard was already harming communities. Public events were canceled, people were afraid to leave their homes, send their kids to school, and even go do basic functions like grocery shopping, attending religious gatherings and places of worship, going to medical appointments, and the ER. The increased presence of ICE and CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, already resulted in abuse of civil rights, including excessive use of force, racial profiling, and illegal detention. We've seen federal law enforcement conduct aggressive and violent immigration arrests, showing up on residential streets, at schools, courthouses, and local businesses. People detained after they attended their immigration court hearings that were supposed to be their pathway to permanent legal status. ICE agents were present I guess 2-3 weeks ago now at domestic violence court, which led to victims and survivors of domestic violence reluctant to get a needed restraining order or show up for a court hearing. Behavior that domestic violence advocates have said didn't make their clients safe. We have witnessed shocking examples of longtime residents, parents and children, and many others manhandled in these street arrest operations, including the death of a father who was shot while trying to drive away. In recent weeks, we've seen an escalation in the response of federal agents at the Broadview Detention Center in their response to protesters engaged in protest activity and the press who were covering those interactions. In a majority of cases, these federal agents wore masks and no identifying information that could be used to hold them accountable. You know, I guess it was Friday night going into, and then I guess mostly Friday night, there have been folks who have been going to Broadview, and they reported that, you know, there was tear gas that was used, people were shoved to the ground, there were rubber bullets being used, coming at multiple guards coming in like military gear. There were people on the roof with guns. I mean, it's a really terrifying experience. And talking to folks on the ground last week compared to this week, it's escalating. Thankfully, we have people on the ground, folks like the National Lawyers Guild, who are documenting what's happening. There are activists on the ground who are prepared to help each other when things are happening. And these are the kinds of things that we at the ACLU and other folks are interested in gathering this information to pursue all of the options available to us. So what can be done? So, you know, in Illinois, we have the Trust Act, so we have protections in place for folks who are immigrants or who are undocumented folks, but there's also more to be done. Some of the things that we've encouraged folks to do is providing know your rights information for employers so that they're aware of what protections they can provide for their employees, including what to do if ICE or CPB shows up at their workplace, providing information about resources available to the community. Schools can develop a plan for what happens if ICE or CBP targets their school. What's the plan if a parent is taken away as they're dropping their kids off or coming to pick them up? What if the parent doesn't show up? Their schools are taking these actions, so saying it out loud in case you all are part of school districts to make sure that that's happening in your community as well. For groups and individuals, hosting or attending a Know Your Rights training, interacting, so some of the ones that exist from the ACLU and then other of our partners, interacting with federal agents or National Guard or police, Know Your Rights for employers and employees, and then rapid response trainings. And what those are, and those have been really, really important, is that there are trainings where folks are able to know, and excuse me if you all already know this or do this, where to know what's happening on the ground. So if there's a report of ICE activity, they're trained to know to go there to where that's happening, how to be safe, how to document information. So those are things that people are able to do. The other things that, you know, if you're like, yeah, I'm not into like going out there and, you know, going to where ICE is or going to a training, there are other things folks can do, which like frequenting businesses that are in communities that are targeted or owned by folks who may be targeted, grocery stores, restaurants, volunteering for creating community food delivery programs that deliver food to those who don't feel safe leaving the house, and then assess whether there's a need to support folks who need someone to accompany them to appointments. One of the other things that states and municipalities can do, which is, it is connected, and I'll draw the connection, is around amending our traffic law to reduce unnecessary traffic and pedestrian stops that can be used to profile targeted or vulnerable groups. So for example, one of the things that we've been working on for a while is the possibility of a ban on consent searches. Has anyone ever given a consent search? Do you know what it is? So basically a consent search is, let's say I'm driving my car, I didn't fully stop at the stop sign, and I get pulled over. And while, the officer is like, has my license, it's like, hey, do you mind if I do a search of your car? Do you have a problem with it? Technically, I could say no, but how many of you would feel comfortable saying no? I love that for you. And I don't know for myself. Like, I remember I was driving to Springfield. I go to Springfield for work, and I was on a call, but I had a device. There was a ISP car pulled me over, and my heart was racing. Like, I was talking to my boss, and it's like, Khadine, you work for the ACLU. You do know you're stringing about police officers, but that instinctual feeling is there. So for many people, even if especially if they have nothing to hide, they say yes to these consensual searches. But it becomes a pretext for stopping people to say, well, you don't have a taillight on, one of your taillights is out, or you don't have a license on the front and the back. So we can amend our laws to stop that pretext from happening. While ICE officials, the feds, don't have to follow state and federal laws, we do know of law enforcement entities in different parts of the state who have said, you know what, this, Trust Act, I really don't want to follow it. I know it's the law, but I would rather support what the Trump administration is doing. So if we take away one of those tools in ways that could still make our community safe, it can also create a scenario where it doesn't give the excuse to stop someone, maybe give them a ticket or arrest them for a charge for something that's low level that could be then used to as a precursor to go find them into their communities, and ICE may arrest or detain them, because what we know is that when they say they're going after criminals, I think it's flexible, I guess, what they consider a criminal to be. So that is one thing that could be done at the state level, and it can also be done at the local level. So are there low-level offenses that there can be a policy that law enforcement doesn't stop those folks for those things? We've seen that happen in some of the law enforcement groups that I work with in other parts of the state, where they've done these pilot programs to show that by not asking for consent to search unless there's reasonable articulable suspicion, it hasn't resulted in a higher crime rate. If there is a suspicion, you can, but if there is not, just banning that question altogether. The second area is First Amendment activity. So in March, ICE Homeland Security Investigations arrested and detained lawful permanent resident Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia University graduate who is a lead organizer of campus protests. President Trump and other senior officials warned that this deportation was the first of many to come, and in the last few months, more have indeed followed, including in cases ACLU and ACLU affiliates are litigating now. At the same time, the State Department reportedly launched an artificial intelligence-based review of tens of thousands of student visa holders' social media accounts called Catch and Revoke. That will also involve DOJ, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, USCIS, who is the United States Customs Enforcement Service, issued a notice regarding its collection of social media identifiers from applications through USCIS applications concerning naturalization, asylum, lawful permanent residence, and travel documents. So these aren't just people coming in or people with visas. These are people that may be naturalized citizens, permanent residents. So everybody is up for grab in this context. Trump has already ordered the generalized vetting and screening of all aliens, including those already in the US, and particularly those aliens coming from regions or nations identified, nations with identified security risks. What's considered an identified security risk changes from time to time. You think about the country of, maybe your great-great-great-grandparent came there. That could be on the list at any point. There's no rhyme or reason for what he decides. Well, I guess I have ideas of rhyme or reason, but there's no prediction of whose country could be next on that list. He further directed that whatever information is identified that would support the exclusion or removal of any alien described in this subsection 2B, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall take immediate steps to exclude or remove that alien. The stated purpose of these extreme measures is to ensure that admitted aliens and aliens otherwise already present in the United States do not bear hostile attitudes towards its citizens, culture, government, institutions, or founding principles. And as we've seen with this administration, hostile attitudes towards the government and the president, I mean, that could be anything, including making a joke on late night television. The Trump administration is likely to escalate this effort by seeking or even coercing collaboration by universities and colleges. It could use the threat of revoking federal grants, limiting or eliminating their ability to host international students, the Department of Justice civil rights investigations, which many are currently underway, or potential even criminal prosecution. What would collaboration look like and what would the effects be? Among the worst case scenarios are that the administration uses AI or other means to identify large numbers of students who have engaged in protests or otherwise expressed disagreement with US foreign policy, approaches universities and asks them to investigate and take disciplinary action against these students, and then revoke student visas based on students' suspension or expulsion from the school. And so we saw some of that last year. We saw some of that earlier this year. And so one of the area of policy opportunity is around prohibiting cooperation with dissent-based deportations. So what can that look like at the state level? That could be the state prohibiting state employees, which include public universities and college employees, from voluntarily cooperating or providing information or assistance to federal authorities or authorities of another state for operations that includes investigations, apprehensions, and arrests on the basis of or targeting First Amendment activities. And First Amendment activities could be protests, letters to the editor, and other campus activity. So that's what can be done at the state. So you're like, well, Khadine, we can't control the state. What can we do? So at the local level, so at the municipal level, you can have school districts who can, and in addition to school districts, private colleges and universities could decide for themselves to review and make changes to policies to prohibit or limit voluntary cooperation or providing assistance to state or federal authorities for operations based on targeting First Amendment activity. They could also limit the collection and sharing of student data, including biometric information, political or on-campus activism activity. Some schools also provide healthcare to students, limiting the collection and limiting it to just what is necessary, and not sharing that information as well. So there's some actions that cross multiple issues. One of them is around location and data privacy. The more information that's available and collected by different entities about you, the more ways it could be weaponized in known, unknown, and unexpected ways. And when I think of unexpected ways, I did not know that DOJ was going to happen. That was not on the bingo card of the ACLU of things that we were looking at, where you would have random people having access to all of our information in ways that we would never have anticipated, because there were supposed to be privacy protections in place and limitations on who has access to that information. One of the things that we've been working on is legislation at the state level. It's called the Protect Health Data Privacy Act. It's House Bill 3494. I can follow up with Kara on some information about it if folks are interested. Basically, and this was legislation that we drafted post the Dobbs leak. And it was the idea of there's health data information that should be protected. We heard stories of different tech companies and even providers who were tracking information of what people are searching for, using that and monetizing that. People didn't realize it could be shared with law enforcement. The common example is somebody, anybody has a Fitbit or a smartwatch of some kind? Okay, and some kind of period tracker or some other kind of tool. Many people didn't realize that when I give this information, that information could be shared with people, and wow, it would have been great for us to know that. So what this bill says is if you're a regulated entity, and you are collecting, storing, selling, or sharing health data broadly, so instead of just limiting it to repro and gender-affirming care, all health data, because we don't know how it's going to be weaponized, they have to have a policy in place that tells the consumer what they do with your data. And you have to give informed consent. So it can't just be like, we're doing this, okay, bye. It has to be affirmative consent. So if there is a button of some kind that says this is what they're doing, I have to say, I have read this and I agree to you collecting this information. Separately, there needs to be a separate agreement if you're going to sell the information, because folks have no idea what that, if you hear that there was a data breach in filling the blank company, if you realize, oh, I think when I read this agreement, they may sell it with people like this company that had a data breach. People need to know what's happening to their data. So in addition to the privacy policy, there needs to be provisions on being able to delete your information if you don't want that information collected. You have to confirm that it's been deleted. There's language that limits limits law enforcement's ability to have access to your health data without a warrant. It also limits what we call geofencing. So there are some times if you go into, let's say, a doctor's office or a grocery store, sometimes people get like, oh, we think you'd love this ad. We think you'd love this coupon. It limits the ability to get those kinds of targeting and your specific geolocation if you're at any kind of healthcare facility, so that people can track where you're going and what kind of care that you have access to. It also has the thing that drives the tech company crazy, a private right of action. So not just AG enforcement, but if you violate the law, then there should be a consequence. Because what we've seen is that sometimes companies are like, I'll violate the law. As you know, our Attorney General is very, very busy, filing lots of lawsuits, and we really appreciate that. So he does not have the capacity with his staff to go after every single company that may violate the law. So that part is really, really important. And I mention this because, when I talk to people about the Health Data Privacy Act, they're like, oh, that's a no-brainer. Like, yeah, that's good. I'm all in for it. But what we've found is that the tech companies are in this place of, we can't do it, Khadine. There's no way. How are we going to do it? And I tell them nicely, well, there's a state called Washington State, and they press a law like this. So you actually already have to do it. So it is about them not wanting to comply with the laws that are in place, and they also, because we have a private right of action, are concerned about what that enforcement would look like. Now more than ever, we've seen with this administration how important it is to protect all of our health data. We don't know how it's going to be used. We don't know what this administration will be doing with it, so it is really, really critical for this law to pass. So if this is something that you think is important, it would be great for you to identify it as a priority issue for your legislator. Email them, call them, tell them if you see them, hanging out or at a farmer's market collecting petition signatures, telling them that you want our health data privacy to be protected. If they're a state legislator, state senator, or rep, and they go to Springfield for their job, ask them if they would sign on as a sponsor of the bill, a co-sponsor of the bill, have them take some action around it. Go to town halls and any kind of legislator constituent events and tell them that this issue is important to them. And I've seen some legislators have surveys for their constituents, so fill out the survey, rank this as one of the one in the top 3 items of interest for you. And then tell your friends. You all are here. It sounds like you all are from different parts of, not just from Skokie or Chicago, so tell people in your community about this law. If you're affiliated with an organization who you think might be interested in being a supporting organization, and literally all that means is that you support the law. It's not, you don't have to necessarily lobby on behalf of it. I know people are concerned about C3, C4 things. Talk to me afterwards, and if you're interested in learning more, being a part of a fact sheet to show your support, please let me know. The other area is around automatic license plate readers, ALPRs. Raise your hand if you've heard the term ALPR. Awesome, awesome. Raise your hand if you've heard FLOC. Awesome. So automatic license plate readers are essentially this tool that law enforcement can use to basically scan license plates. And what they will say is this is a really helpful tool to fight crime so that we know, if there's a missing person, we can find them quickly. They're also a surveillance tool. I don't know if you all, sometimes they look like, it looks like a solar panel, like on the side of the street. So keep your eyes peeled for it. Once you have it in your head, you may see it all the time. And basically, we also have expressway cameras that have ALPR, automatic license plate reader technology. So it is possible to know if somebody crosses the border from Missouri, comes to Chicago to get some kind of reproductive health care or gender-affirming care, you'll know exactly where they stayed, where they were parked. Lots of garages have access to it. They share it with law enforcement. And you could tell the tale of somebody's life. You can tell who they're interacting with, what organizations and associations you're a part of, where you go to church, where you park, where you travel. And they can also kind of figure out like, oh, Khadine is always between the hours of like 10 to this period of time. We see her car on the street, so she probably lives in this address. So it's a tool that could be pretty privacy invasive. We worked with the Secretary of State's Office on a law that essentially said that law enforcement shouldn't share automatic license plate reader information with other entities, so other law enforcement entities in the state or the feds or other states, unless they have a written collaborative agreement that essentially says, we will not use the ALPR information we're collecting for investigations around reproductive care, gender-affirming care, or immigration activity. What we saw is that there were some law enforcement entities that still allowed for their data to be shared in that way. So it is a place where we're working on legislation to tighten up that law, to have a stick if that information is shared. But we've seen, and this is a very local issue because there was an attempt to do legislation at the state level, and there was an issue for us. We want data to be retained only for, so basically a hit data. So if I'm looking for somebody for a warrant for criminal activity, I scan your license plate, it's not a hit, delete it right away. Law enforcement, when we came to negotiations, they were like, we would like it forever. And so we got to the place of 3 years, and that was a non-negotiable for us because we knew at the local level, there were some entities that had it for 48 hours. There are some places where they had it for 2 weeks. There's the norm, the average right now is 30 days. So that's why it's been a local level thing. But FLOC, they came into Illinois and we talk a lot of law enforcement entities. I know Skokie's police department uses FLOC as well. But we've had places like Evanston who recently, after learning about FLOC's tools sharing with other law enforcement, they got rid of that contract and they're not using automatic license plate readers. We know of entities where they don't share their information using FLOC. If somebody wants to get information because they're trying to solve a crime or it's an emergency circumstance, they call the law enforcement entity directly. So some of the changes that could be made at the local level is, 1, ending the contract. 2, if that's not feasible, not sharing data with municipalities. But if they do require some kind of case file so you can do a back-end check to make sure they're actually doing it for the purpose that they said that they're doing it. Limiting data, so non-hit data, limiting it for 24 hours unless there's a warrant or it's needed for some kind of further investigation. And then really important to prohibit the sale and purchase of automatic license plate reader data from private companies or brokers. There is a workaround that some law enforcement entities can use, which is to say, we'll just buy it from private vendors. You know, that's all good with us, but that's not good for our civil liberties or our civil rights. The other thing is making sure your law enforcement entity is following the law around some of the surveillance devices they use. We worked on a law that regulates the law enforcement's use of drones, for example, making sure that they don't use facial recognition technology while they're flying drones, making sure that if you're engaged in First Amendment activity, so a protest, that you're not using a drone there, because if you have a drone with cameras and you're surveilling, like, who are the people who go to the anti-Trump protests? And that information could then be stored somewhere where if you're in a task force with the feds around like ending retail theft, then that information could be shared. And then the feds can then have a database of like, let's see who are the people who are at these protests. And now we know that that could be weaponized against us. So making sure that they follow the drone reporting law, so reporting when drones are used and not using drones for First Amendment activity, making sure, like if you're talking to your law enforcement folks, just confirming that they're not using any kind of facial recognition technology on their drones. The other thing is around school districts ensuring that student privacy and personal student data is protected. So it's really important to protect students' rights to learn and communicate privately without constantly being subjected to invasive surveillance technologies so that they can explore new ideas and interact with their peers. freely and safely. So a lot of schools have Chromebooks that they get from Google, where it's like, this is great, we can't afford Chromebooks, but Google, you're the best. And that can also result, depending on the contract, in some kind of information sharing. What are they looking at? So is there regulation around access to the information of that young person? What are you doing if they're looking at something which maybe someone at the school may find objectionable? Are they then disciplined for that? Is that put in their record? So those kinds of privacy protective things are really important. We encourage student safety focused schools to make wiser, better informed decisions involving ed tech surveillance, and ed tech is just essentially saying tools that you use in the school that can also have the ability to surveil students. So, and some of it, for folks taking the bar exam, there was a biometric requirement where if you look to the left or the right, something would go off. So they're basically scanning your retina. Biometric information is probably as personal as your fingerprint. So if you're a school where if you're using some electronic device in order to take a test, we don't want the iris scanning of our young people to be there. I learned that there's a school in Aurora where when you're coming in, they were using biometric information to identify whether or not the student is a student or not. The problem with that is, and I asked, it's like, well, why do you need to do that? Because there's a guard, right? And they have a badge. And they're like, yeah, but we have, I think it was 14 different doors. I'm like, but how many of those doors are open? They're like, well, just this one. There was no need to do it. And what ends up happening is that, thinking about this time that we're in, if your family member is somebody who is undocumented, they're dropping their kids off to school, they're going to a basketball or football game, and their information is being collected, they have no idea it's happening. Those are the kinds of things that we want to make sure that when schools are making the choice to use technology, getting a sense of why are we using it? Is this the best use of technology? Does it make us safer? Is it needed? The other places are to make sure that schools can review current data collection practices to ensure that schools don't collect information on immigration status unless it's required by state or federal law and only for a legitimate education purpose. And any data that's collected on sexual orientation or gender identity has strong privacy protocols in place. We want to ensure that schools will not release student records to law enforcement for immigration purposes or for investigations, or investigations related to gender affirming care without a valid judicial warrant or subpoena. That's really important now because the Trump administration has gone after young people who are seeking gender affirming care that could even be affirming the gender that they are. So whether or not students are using the quote unquote right pronoun. So those are the kinds of things where we want schools to be thinking about. And then ensuring that the school personnel shall not voluntarily assist law enforcement in gender affirming care related investigatory efforts or share that information with federal and state law. So some general things that groups and individuals can do: attend city council hearings or school board meetings where civil liberty issues may be on the agenda. Mobilize other people to attend or speak during public comment to show your support for policies that protect or increase civil liberties or in opposition for policies to restrict them. We've heard a lot about, have folks heard of the group Moms Demand Action? They are everywhere all the time. So they are in school board spaces where they're learning about, what's next on the agenda. They're trying to shift policy in ways that might not be aligned with your values or with a democratic approach to education. So showing up, and even if you're just going, sitting and listening, that can be really helpful because you could alert people like us to say, hey, Khadine, and we've had that with some of our folks. There's this thing that's coming up on the school board. Did you know about it? Or I really would like to speak against it, but I don't know what to say or how to say it. We've provided people with talking points if it's aligned with the issues that we work on and provide them with support for that kind of work. So it is a place where things are happening at the local level, so not just the state, but the hyper-local level, and having folks there who are listening, who are paying attention can be really great. It's also really great for elected officials to hear in this moment where people are scared. I mean, in Illinois, we have these great laws around protecting gender-affirming care, and we have the SHIELD law that's supposed to protect folks. But then we're dealing with providers who are worried because they're worried about funding being cut off. They're worried about being served with subpoenas. And We've been telling folks don't comply in advance, but at the end of the day, they're making these risk assessment calculations, and they're hearing from their lawyers who are telling them all the reasons not to, but sometimes hearing up from people about all the reasons to hold strong can be really helpful. So that said, in your school board meeting or a city council meeting, you showing up and telling your lawmakers you're doing the right thing, or we're here if you choose to capitulate, can be super meaningful at this time. And for city council hearings, I think it's helpful around thinking about policing policies that deal with, we're most interested in policing policies that deal with protest activity or new or expanding surveillance devices if they're being contemplated. And those are the kinds of things where we'd want people to ask why. What's the measure of success? Why is this needed? Why is this the best tool? Can there be, if you're going to move forward with it, can there be a sunset so you can actually assess whether or not it's working? The other place is to tell your elected officials and those running for office about the issues that are important to you and confirm where they stand on them. So that is very individual to you, but I think it's really important now. Elected officials are running for office. They want you to sign their petitions. What are the things that you want them to know that is really important and critical to you? And that could be at the congressional level, but at the state level and the local level as well. It's like the lower you get in terms of Congress versus the state versus a school board, the votes make such a huge difference, and your influence is even more. We've had state legislators who won by 6 votes. And so talking to them, telling them what you want is critical. And also when they're doing the right thing, thanking them. We have legislators who are always doing the right thing, and after a while, people are like, Kelly Cassidy, she's gonna vote the right way, why do we even bother? But sometimes it is hard to be that person who's always voting the right way, so a thank you now and then means a lot. The other place is showing up. To rallies, to protests, to rapid response trainings, community meetings, conversations, organization Zooms, town halls, showing up in whatever capacity you can shows there's a community of people who care, and we're not going to accept what is happening over the 9 months as normal. And I mean, I'm speaking to the choir because you all are here and you've showed up. There are ways to plug in, just flagging that on October 18th, there's going to be the No Kings National Day of Action, and it's a mass mobilization against President Trump's abuse of power and federal crackdown on all of our freedoms. The other place is organizing or attending education opportunities. We do an Advocacy 101, so if you're ever interested in learning how to talk to your elected official, it's a free thing. We tailor it to whatever group we're working with, so we're happy to go to wherever you are. We can talk to one person, we could talk to many, many people. So that is, and it also helps get a sense of what's happening at the state level and how you could be impactful. And then also issue and policy education opportunities, bringing folks together for a conversation about things that are connected to the issues that we've talked about. So for example, privacy, policing, artificial intelligence, these are things that we're seeing that are going to be consequential things with this administration and outside of it. So if you are interested in what is AI? What is generative AI, and why should I care? We're happy to do a training for folks on it that's very basic so folks can get an understanding, and also happy to talk about the different ways that it can impact the work that you're doing. This is really important for us to do with human services folks who do work in Springfield, because this last session, we were in a budget crisis, and really making sure that the folks who are doing budget advocacy and they're sitting in meetings with agencies who are talking about, well, we may have to use other tools, making sure they know, like, by other tools, do you mean AI? How is it going to be used? Will they decide who gets benefits or not? Is there going to be a human involved in the conversation? So giving them that grounding is also helpful for us, because now we have more people in the fight when we're talking about how to regulate these powerful systems. And then talking to people in your life that may not be aligned with you politically. How many of you have a family member or a family member of your significant other or a friend who you're like, I don't even want to talk to them about politics? We need you to have those conversations. And I say that because I could talk to people as much as I want, but it doesn't matter. They don't know me. And I think in this moment, and I say this knowing it is hard to have these conversations right now. It is hard to see people as humans. It's hard to meet people where they are. But there needs to be that kind of conversation happening. And those are the hardest conversations that we have to get people to move and understand what we're dealing with right now. So that is a challenge opportunity for you, because if you don't do it, who's going to do it? And it is very critical. And then I'll end with, we can't normalize what's happening. This is not normal, this is not real, this is not what our democracy is supposed to look like. This is scary, it is confusing, but we can't say that it's okay or normal. I was thinking about the first Trump election. Do y'all remember Kellyanne Conway when there was the his inauguration, and she was like, there are all these people there, and then they're like, well, actually, according to the numbers, it was this amount, and she's like, well, that's fake news. That's become part of our lexicon. Fake news, like, it is wild. And so all of these, sometimes I'm listening to the president talk about things, it's like, that is a lie. Like, what is it teaching our young people and even us to know that the president is lying? It's okay to be a bully. And now it's a bully with like really, really incredible consequences. The idea of threatening Rosie O'Donnell to take away her citizenship when he does not have the power to do it. The EOs that he's putting out there where he doesn't actually have the power to do it. So we're litigating. It's always important for us to remember that this is not real. We can't give in. We have to fight. And I really appreciate you all being here, and thank you so much.
Wow, I could have just kept listening for like a whole nother hour. There's so much to think about there. So take a minute and think to yourselves. We're going to have a moment for questions and answers, and I'll ask you to line up there. But first, we ask you to consider making a contribution to the society, which can be made at our website. There should be a slide shortly shown with a QR code, or there's actually a QR code at the back if you'd like. And we'll be passing a basket. It is through the generosity of folks like you that we can have great programs like this and keep this building open. So we suggest a donation of $10, any amount or none. If you can't afford it, that's cool too. No judgment there. We're grateful for everyone who helps sustain the society, whether it's through money, whether it's through time, whether it's through energy and passion and all of the good work that you do. So let's just have a brief interlude while you gather your thoughts. All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone. We have a healthy amount of time for Q&A. Please go ahead and line up and ask Khadine any questions that you would like.
Hello, thank you so much for your talk. Very enlightening. When we're talking about things we can do, one of my many anxieties I've gathered over this administration is November 2026. One, if it's also actually happening, and two, what can we do to safeguard our votes, our ability to vote, our, all the people across the country in places where voting might be more restricted due to legislative choices and all that. What can we do to prepare and be ready for that?
Yeah, so one of the things that folks are able to do is being election judges. Like, that is a thing that they're always looking for election judges. People don't show up, and it can be a really helpful tool to make sure that people are able to vote as they're allowed to, knowing the rules, and if there is some like hanky-panky stuff going on, being able to report that. That's one of those things. Two, I think, there are folks who sometimes are like, why do we even care? Why should I even vote? We did this bill around voting in jails and making sure that people with a criminal record know that once they are released from jail and they've served their time, they're still able to vote. And so we'd go to different communities and have posters like, do you have a record? You can still vote. And I've had conversations with folks where they're like, yeah, so Illinois is corrupt, Chicago is corrupt, why should I even vote? And then one of the things we talk about is like, I hear that, and think about the person, the judge who you were before. Like, do you feel like your sentence was fair? You can vote for judges. And they're like, ah, yes, who knew? And that could be a mobilizing place. So I think talking to people about like, yes, there is all of this concern, but if we don't vote and show up, then there's no way for us to win. And then also thinking down ballot. So you're not just voting for the top, you're voting for all levels. So yes, but it's a place of anxiety in terms of like, we hope that he will let go. But I think some of what we're seeing with the National Guard and why we're fighting back against that is that a preparation to desensitize people to the idea of National Guard being in place when it's time to vote. So it is so important to push back against this idea of federal people don't belong here. I think one of the things that folks are able to do is even writing an op-ed like, the National Guard isn't here, and we think that's great. ICE and CBP are here, we do not feel safer. So there could be that out there, people are seeing, even if they're in their homes feeling scared, that somebody is saying the thing that they're saying as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for your talk. As someone, I live in the city, and I've been very involved in migrant stuff for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you mentioned, there's sort of two aspects to the lack of accountability. So you sort of said there's state law, but some local enforcement places aren't necessarily conforming. So I'm curious if you can help me think about how to stay optimistic of the importance of creating these laws when we're not confident that they can be held, like that people are in fact being held to account. And the other side of the accountability thing, I'm aware of many protesters who are held for a day and then not charged or something, but the federal government has the option for 5 years to decide to press charges, like they're held and let go without charges. So where's the accountability later? Like, how do you fix that kind of stuff where it was not a legit thing, and yet it's sort of this cloud that hangs over, and there's scores and scores of people in Chicago in that circumstance. So I feel like this accountability on two sides. How do we expunge things you shouldn't be accountable for on that side, but on the law enforcement downstate in a town needs to follow the law, and how do we do that?
Yeah, and thank you for those questions. I'll go with the local part first. So under the law, so a sheriff is responsible for following the law in Illinois. If they don't follow the law, then the AG's office, their responsibility to hold them accountable. People can also hold them accountable by voting them out of office. So what we've seen and what we've been waiting for is the AG has been investigating what happened to figure out, is this somebody who actually violated the law or somebody who said they violated the law? So I think, we're hoping that the law is working as anticipating, and we're also pressuring as well to ask, is there an investigation, what's going to happen? Because I think for folks who are relying on this law to be a safeguard, having an example where somebody said something and there's no accountability or an explanation can be really jarring. The other place is with the automatic license plate reader bill that I mentioned around the Secretary of State's office saying that they can't share it. I think that's why, for me, having going back in with how do we make sure that we can hold people accountable? I've met with Flock to figure out like this idea of having something tied to like a criminal or some kind of investigative document. Is that possible? Yes, it's possible. So now, if on the back end we can say, Texas has been saying they're not doing anything for immigration or repro, let's go look and see what Texas has asked for and what they've done. And if they are lying, then they don't have access to that information. In terms of the federal charges and what the federal government is doing, I think it's hard, especially with this administration. I know that our office and other entities around Chicago, they are looking at the actions that the feds are doing to, there are use of force cases that could be brought. There are other kinds of accountability mechanisms at place. And so suing them is one of the things that we will use those tools. And it's also something that's not guaranteed. I mean, as I said earlier, there are lots of folks who have done criminal justice work and policing accountability work. And I would say there are some people who feel like it doesn't work even at the state level, right? So I think it is still pushing to use those tools, because if we abandon those tools, then it's not even an option anymore, and then they totally get away with it. And I think people showing up and showing their anger and frustration at what's happening. One of the things we saw in DC and also in LA is that people showing up made a huge difference in terms of how law enforcement reacted. And I want to share, I was talking to some advocates from, I think it was DC, and they gave an example of something where I was like, that could be really cool, where, so ICE was coming to a particular community, they knew what was happening, and instead of a protest, they had a block party. And it was all about joy and fun. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry, you can't get through our area because we have a block party happening. So I think thinking about those other ways to limit law enforcement interaction. I don't know about the 5-year statute of limitations, so that's something I don't like answering things I don't know. So I could definitely try to circle back with that.
Yes, you do speak fast. Wow. You
know,
covered
I
so
know.
many things, and they're important. I think the ACLU has done amazing work. I think part of it, and part of the work, evidence for that is the district courts and the appellate courts that have acted on these executive orders of Trump and other things. And I hear on WCPT 820 AM radio, which is Chicago Progressive Talk, that at least 90% of the cases have been won. And a lot of them must be ACLU on the job.
And
I
other
throw that
partners
out.
too. I can't claim credit for all of them, but
Yeah.
I think there are lots of folks who are
ACLU has
engaged.
been
And also our AG's
amazing,
office.
amazing work. I just want to give a shout out to a company that had has a DEI program, and I think, you can correct me, it still refuses to back down, and that's Costco. Costco has refused to the Trump orders to remove DEI language and all that stuff. And I rejoined Costco. I wasn't a member. I rejoined them again because they're standing up against him. And I wondered if you knew whether there was any other action the Trump administration is taking against him that's under our visibility or something.
For Costco, not that I've heard of, and I'm glad that you rejoined and to affirm what they're doing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just want to tell people about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Thank
what
you.
we've seen with, I don't know if folks remember that a bunch of law firms, really fancy law firms, were like, oh, okay, you said, we should stop doing this kind of hiring, we should give money to your fund, and they bent the knee. And I think in our office, that was a day where it was like, holy shit, like you guys are like the fanciest of the fancies, and you all just said yes. And it's been interesting to see that there are some law firms, and some of them are Chicago-based, who said, no, we're not going to do what you said. We're going to continue our practices. And they ended up getting clients who went from the firms that, acquiesce to joining their firms because they realize at the end of the day, if there's a fight, who's going to fight for you? So I think it's a helpful time to see who complies and who does not. But it was a good thing to see that there are some of those law firms who said, no, we're not going to do what you want. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. It was really great. And yes, you do talk fast.
I know.
Fortunately, we're recording it, so I can go back and listen. You mentioned the emergency response on the immigration teams and Know Your Rights teams. And there are a number of people here in Skokie who have been active, but there was a situation where the training for that kind of got muddled. There was some confusion, or there was some ambiguity about what was the right training or what was the official training and how to access that. Is there a resource of information about that kind of activity to make sure that people are going to the right place and getting the right training and learning the right things and connecting with the right people to be effective?
Yeah, so ICER, I don't know who provided your training, but ICER, the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, they do Know Your Rights trainings, and they're a go-to partner. We also have a bunch of resources on our website, ours, and also the resources from partners as well. I could share that with Kara, and she can maybe share with folks so that you can get a sense of who's doing those trainings. And those are people that we've partnered with and we work with, and we trust where they are. I think some of the conversations about the National Guard and the Federal Guard got muddled in terms of like what are people's actual rights and how those play out. But yeah, happy to share those after the fact. Thank you. And thank you for going to a training and for the folks who were there, because I think that's important.
Thank you so much for a
Thank
great
you.
talk. So in the last week or two since this assassination of Charlie Kirk, we have seen a lot of people called out for social media posts that I think in the past would have been seen as somewhat mild. You know, like locally, we've seen teachers, one in Buffalo Grove, Oak Forest, a school board member in Algonquin, calls for them to be gotten rid of because of social media posts that did not celebrate his death, but question or reminded people that you may want to consider the beliefs and the comments of this person before you celebrate them. So, somewhat not, I don't think they're offensive posts. So I'm wondering what people's legal rights are when it comes to their profession and what they post on social media. And I want to include in that not somebody who's posting something that we would all find offensive,
Yeah.
but somebody who maybe posts that they attended the No King's Day march and they not posting a sign with an expletive on it, who's a
Yeah.
teacher, but just saying they attended the No King's March. What are their legal rights to do that on social media? And then putting the legal rights aside, if this were a loved one, somebody who you, in your family, asking, is it okay for me to post about attending No King's Day, even though I'm the town librarian? And assuming this person wants to keep their job and likes their job, what advice you would give your loved one? So legal rights, and then
Yeah, and as we've seen, and what you described is protected speech. So people have the ability and the right to, outside of their work time, make comments about whatever that person posted. It is not an incitement to violence, like that speech is protected. And an employer technically has the ability to say that, Khadine, you did this post and it has created this harm in this particular way. It violates our policies that are written. You should know that this would have violated the policy, and they may have the ability to fire somebody. That person, though, then has the ability to retain legal counsel to challenge that firing. So I guess one of the things I would say is that if somebody is fired or disciplined, seek the counsel of an employment attorney as opposed to just letting it happen, because I think that is important to do as a way to resist and fight back, because if we say nothing, then that becomes the norm. I think if I were talking to a loved one, I think it's complicated, right? We all come to our jobs with different levels of privilege, right? So I tell people when I talk to them, like, you have to assess your risk tolerance. Is it preferable for people to not be chilled? Yes, because the more we're chilled, like if everybody in this room, just think about it. Let's say like 4 of us right now, we're like, it does not feel safe at all to post anything. And then, your neighbors are like, wow, those 4 people, they don't want to post. Maybe I shouldn't post. And then eventually, like, it may end up being just 1 or 2 people are willing to do it. And that's how the other side wins. So I would say, you have the right to do it. Think through the consequences, but then also think through, like, are there other people in your organization who can be supportive of you? Like, do you post things together at the same time? If you're called out for some kind of disciplinary action, I mean, you can show like, yeah, you're saying I should be disciplined for this, but here are some other things that, folks have done that didn't trigger that specific reaction. Explain to me, help me understand why that's the case. Are you targeting me for like specific speech that you don't agree with? Is it possible for your colleagues to support you to make sure that if you're posting it, that they have your back in case there's a conversation with a manager about it? So those are things that people can do. And I know it's not a do it, don't do it. I think it just depends on the person. And just knowing that each time we are silent, it is another chip at our freedom. I joke with my partner, I'm like, James, I sometimes wish I could just shut up. I don't have to fight all the fights, but there's something in me where I just can't. But I also I'm aware of this administration, and everybody has that line for themselves. Like, where is the place that for your own reasons, and it has to be an individual choice. But I again will say that those posts are protected speech. Like, if there is speech that people may find uncomfortable, and then there's actual hate speech, and we're seeing that people are targeted for things that aren't even hate speech. It's here's what this person said, and that is targeting them as well. I tell people at the ACLU we have no permanent friends or enemies, because we're also like support speech that people do not agree with. Like, there are types of doxing that may be considered free speech as well. So yeah, it's complicated. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Thank you for a great talk. I am just curious, I assume in your role as a lobbyist in Springfield and at the local level, that you talk to lawmakers from both sides of the aisle. And I'm just curious, like, in private conversations or just casual conversations, do you ever hear anything from the GOP side about possible misgivings about what's going on, or something that they might not share in public, and maybe like some insight as to why? Are they, for example, are they afraid of primary opponents? Are they, you know, God forbid, getting death threats? I mean, and I know that's happened on both sides of the aisle. So I'm just curious what you might have to share about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some folks who are Republicans who, even with the first administration, it's like, but I'm not that kind of Republican, and who feel like their party is being taken down a pretty dark path. I think some of it is fear of being reelected. I mean, even before Trump times, I'll give an example of, there's a legislator who is a Republican, smart person, a younger person. I was talking to him about an anti-bullying bill and about a sex ed bill. And I was like, you know, Rep, fill in the blank. I'm just curious, why are you not supportive of supporting an anti-bullying bill? And what's the concern with, you know, supporting sex ed that's not mandatory? It's like, if you teach it, then it has to be medically accurate, age appropriate. And he's like, you know, I wouldn't be reelected if I did. Like, that is, I personally believe it, but that's not what I'm able to do. And I think that's the hard part. So there are a lot of those people who may have those feelings, but feel like if they want to stay in office, they can't say the things out loud. I do wonder, when is the time that you have to say the things out loud, right? At some point, it is too much. I mean, their communities are being harmed. I mean, think about House Bill, I don't want to say the BB bill, but like, that's going to impact their constituents in horrible ways. So at what point is it enough to say, you know what, I'd rather not have this job? We've also seen a lot of legislators and some Republicans who are not running for office anymore. Since I started doing lobbying work back in 2011, and we used to have moderate Republicans who voted for issues across the board, and now it's become less Republicans, and then it's a push to have them, you know, stay as a bloc. And sometimes we have defections where people vote for the interest of their constituents, but yeah. And I think the other thing I see sometimes is, if you look at the floor debate on the floor, you can see like folks going at it with each other from different parties, and you're like, oh my God, they must hate each other. And then afterwards, they're like, oh great, that was fun, blah, blah, blah. The people seeing it, they don't know that that's happening. And I think that's where, you know, talking to each other and having these folks say out loud, like, we actually do have a relationship. Like, it is okay to humanize these issues, because I think that's where we could potentially have more movement. But people have to be brave in this time. Hello.
I work for a nonprofit healthcare and social services organization, and we rely on a lot of federal funding to serve people who have health disparities in our community. And so I'm actually the project director on one of these grants, and we recently from SAMHSA got a new document with strategic priorities and terms and conditions to our grant that we have to follow the Trump administration's priorities. And so I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations for those of us that have to rely on some. We're doing a risk assessment right now to see if we want to continue with this grant, if the benefits outweigh the costs. But if you have any recommendations for those of us that do have to interact in this way, how do we protect ourselves if the mission and vision and values of what we're trying to do runs anathema to what we're being told we have to do by the government?
Yeah. So one thing I know that on our litigation side, there are spaces where they're connecting folks like you with legal advisors to help figure some of that out. So I don't know the size of your org if those are there. And I think those are the kinds of things that we're interested in and not just us, but other entities around litigation. I think the Head Start example that was part of why, to stop it from happening. Can we enjoin it so you don't even have to get to that point? But it is hard. I mean, you know, I cannot tell somebody, you should not take this money, and then there's no funding to provide the care that's needed. That's even more. I think those are the awful places that this administration has put people like you in. It should not have happened. Congress should take action. I mean, it is just wild that this is where we are. And unfortunately, there's no easy place. And I think in talking to providers, especially around gender affirming care, where I had a call with some parents who were like, I moved from Florida to Illinois because we thought we were going to get this care. Why aren't they providing that care? What's happening? And it's like, we have a law in place, we have a litigation that's there, like those providers can do it, but they're also doing that calculation of, okay, so if I don't do it for these folks, then I can still provide care for these folks, and those are really hard calculations to make. And I wish there was something I could say to be helpful, but if there is a desire to connect to some of those legal folks or other folks who are thinking about how to approach those things, happy to talk with you. And we're always interested in seeing what those updated contracts look like. So yeah, but
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for your talk and what you do. So it's scary times out there, so what gives you hope?
You know, I was, last Sunday, I went to this national conference I mentioned to you all, and I had to do a panel on Monday, and the night before I was like, oh, what are we doing? Like, is there a benefit? Like, it was a pretty, like, not great place, and I was talking to other affiliates. And the next day, we had one of the people who were who gave the talk before the plenary was Keith Ellison. And he's the AG from Minnesota, and it just put like energy into me, because the idea of, we can't give up. This is a dark place that we're in, but we're going to get out of it. Like, and the way we get out of it is organizing. It's like different tools. You know, he talked about, like, you're going to file lawsuits and we're going to lose a bunch of them, but we're also going to win some. Like, we have to have people on the ground organizing. We have to have, like, the people power. And and being with my colleagues from other states, where we're trying everything. Like, we are like, this isn't going to work, let's try this other thing, to know that there are other people who are committed. Also seeing folks who are going to Broadview, who are literally putting their bodies on the line because they don't want their loved ones to get taken away. Like, people are doing what they can. I see this work as a spectrum, where it's like, even if your only thing is to look at what's happening in the news, tell your friend, this is not what's happening, here's where you can find the accurate information. To folks who are doing broad protest work, like, there's a spectrum of the work that we're doing, and I think that is something that gives me hope. Maybe at the end of next week, I will come back with a different answer, but in this moment, and also, I know this is going to sound cheesy, but being here, like, I was looking forward to this, because it's like people who are willing to leave their homes, talk and engage. I learned from Kara that you all then have a discussion time next week, and it's just pretty exciting that folks are willing to engage in some of these issues and not give up hope. I hope you don't give up hope.
So courts don't have an enforcement authority to, once they determine something, how can they enforce what they've determined? And is the Trump administration generally responding to court directives? And I guess that's it. How is the Trump administration responding to court orders that they don't like?
It depends on the order. I think we've had the example where a judge said, you cannot deport these people to this country, bring the plane back, and they're like, oh, already gone, we can't find them. But there have been places where they had to walk back things because the court said that they shouldn't, you know, I think one of them related to funding, like cutting off funding. It's not within the executive power to pull grants, and they had to to walk that back. So I think it's been mixed. I think the more he is getting no's, I think they have to follow it, but I think they will continue to keep like kind of pushing the line. But courts have the ability to say no and enough is enough. I think for some of us, we're just hoping the Supreme Court just does more of the no and not like, well, let's have it go back, you know, it's come to us, we think, I'm not so sure, go back down to the lower courts and have it come back up to us. We need them to take action right now. And I think that's also a place of folks doing, you know, advocacy, like, again, letters to the editor, other kinds of things to tell the Supreme Court, like, you are making a mockery of the Constitution and you need to be held accountable. Because a lot of people are talking to Trump, but they're also collaborators in this as well, because the Constitution is what it is. I was telling Kara, it's like, imagine being in law school now, where you're in con law class and you're like, so last week we said this, this week I'm not so sure. Like, I mean, some of this is like fundamental, and yeah, so.
I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for everything you do every day. Your passion is just like contagious, and I relate to you a lot, like that feeling of like, this is so wrong, we need to work hard. But that's really exhausting. So how do you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, so I, last year, like around like in the end of November, my dog passed away, and he was Duke, amazing, best dog, cat dog ever. And I was like, okay, we're not gonna get a dog, and it was super silent. And then by February, I was like, where's Right Way Rescue? Let's find a dog. And then while Duke was the perfect dog, Octavia, we call her Tavi, she is not the perfect dog. So I think having that distraction has been helpful, where I have to, at some points, get out of like working and like attend to this being who wants attention and is a distraction. And one of the things I've been trying to do with myself is once a week, making myself do something fun, like going to visit friends. I'm a hobby collector, so if anybody has hobbies that I can collect, let me know. I tend to have like maybe a 2 to 3 window of focus in on it. So I think doing those things, and like, it's important for us to remember why we're fighting, right? We're fighting for your daughter, for our friends, for just to feel safe. And it is hard, you know, and I'm giving you a hug because it is really difficult. And it's okay to have moments where you feel like, I just don't want to hear or do anything anymore. I just need today or a week to just have a breath. During 2020, I was like, I'm so tired of like protest stuff and policing. All of my work issues were colliding together. So I started watching Korean dramas. I don't speak Korean. It's a new culture. I didn't have to like, and none of my work things were there. And since then, I've been watching Korean dramas, and it takes me away to a totally different world. And that is my guilty pleasure sometimes. So it's okay to have a breath, because we're human. Yeah. Hello.
I'm concerned about the attempts to silence the media, television, and radio through monetary judgments. It's one thing for them to back off and say, well, you know, there'd be too much pushback if we pulled their licenses. But if they continue to win $15 billion judgments against NBC or whatever, and gradually we get less and less true coverage, I mean, is there any legal way of stopping them from bankrupting companies and getting them silenced through bankruptcy? And then it's like, no, but we didn't pull their license, we didn't take any action, it's just they broke the law, they got fined, they had to go out of business, not our problem, you know? And a corollary to that is the Supreme Court ever gonna grow a pair to be crude and say, you know, enough, we're gonna finally say no to you? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer the second question first. I'm hoping so. I mean, it's disappointing to say the least. I think with the media companies, I think part of it is that they're also settling. They're choosing to settle because it is to their advantage, because they want to have another deal with another company. And it's also, I mean, if we think about the media, it's been consolidated throughout the years, so few people control all of these media entities. So maybe it's time for independent media again, where we give those folks, I mean, I talk to people sometimes, and even if you're watching MSNBC, CNN, Fox, it's like, it's the same version of the same thing, depending on your political place. And for some people, it's like, I just want to know what are the facts. And I think independent journalists, they're still there, they're still doing that work. And so while the mainstream media may be acquiescing, I think maybe it's like raising up the folks who are part of independent journalism. And I know that that might not be as easy to get to, but I do think that in addition to judgments made against them, they're also choosing to settle. It's kind of like the law firms. What would happen if they all said, no, we're done, right? So it's their action as well. And I think it's also, people can speak, to your point, with their subscriptions and money to say, we're not going to support you if you've just agreed to fire this person who said, you know, a factual thing that Charlie Kirk said, and they were fired immediately, versus Fox, their broadcaster, said that people experiencing homelessness should get a lethal injection, and he's still there. There needs to be some accountability there too.
And this is gonna be our last question.
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything you're saying and the information you're presenting. Can you give us a sense of both the legal knowledge and street knowledge that you have of the degree to which the Chicago police are cooperating with local intentions to stay neutral and not support the efforts of ICE or intrusion from outside? To what degree is that, in your understanding, happening? To what degree isn't it happening?
So my understanding, based on what I've been told, is that if, let's say, there is a person who's pulled over and there are ICE officials there, and CPD pulls up and they're called about, you know, somebody is being taken away by ICE. If it is around immigration enforcement, they are not involved. They are not going to be involved. Any kind of, from their what they've said is that if they try to, like, you know, get involved because it's a use of force that's excessive based on what CPD is allowed to do, then that could be seen as coordinating with them. If there is a protest that's happening, and let's say there is a, you know, CPD is, you know, they're in charge of protests, but it gets over to a federal building where the feds have the authority, they will not get involved in that kind of interaction. So that is what they said. I know from protesters, they felt that CPD isn't doing enough to protect them, or they have felt, there was an incident that happened, I think more like a month, or it's all a blur at the time, but there was a immigration raid, and protesters felt that CPD went in to help ICE. CPD's perspective was they got a call, officer in distress call, so that's why they went. So I think depending on who you talk to, how people are feeling it, because they're expecting law enforcement to, you know, intervene if somebody's being brutalized. But my understanding is CPD's orders are to not get involved. I think if we are hearing of them being involved, I think if you all are hearing that, that's information that we'd want to see, and we're in communication with our folks on the ground as well to learn about that. I hope that answered your question.
By and large, is it mostly that most police are cooperating to stay neutral or not?
Based on what I understand, when there are ICE enforcements and ICE raids, those are done by feds only, and CPD or most of the law enforcement folks aren't involved. So there was a situation in Elgin where a door was rammed in because ICE was trying to get to folks. The Elgin Police Department wasn't there. It was all ICE folks. Yeah, but that is what I know, versus I don't know for the areas where there are less rapid response people and there are Republican sheriff who is aligned with ICE. I don't know what's happening there. But if anybody does know, that's information I'd really love to have. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Khadine. Hopefully she'll be able to stick around for a few minutes during coffee hour. I will be escorting her out so that you don't swarm her here. So let us get out. In the meantime, I want to go ahead and read a few society announcements. We will have a newcomers chat today upstairs in the library. You can head up the stairs here or take the elevator. And our membership committee invites new visitors to join us. It's just an informal chance to chat and get to know a little more about our community, our activities, and think about getting more involved. And if you are new today and it's your first time here, we ask if you didn't get one of these when you first came in, please fill one out. It helps us keep in touch with you. You can get on our newsletter. And unsubscribe too if you want to, that's fine. Our next virtual community chat will be Wednesday, September 24th at 7 p.m. We share friendship, issues of the day, and fun in a caring Zoom chat. So join us to connect and enjoy each other's company. You can find the link in today's bulletin or the activities page of our website. Our next game night will be Friday, October 3rd from 6 to 9 p.m. All are welcome to join us for a relaxed evening of board games, and also there will be singing for those who choose to join. We'll have some games here. Feel free to bring your favorites. And if you can, bring a snack or some drinks to share. Don't have to sing if you don't want to. Different room. Yeah, not everybody likes singing. But there's some good science behind it, why singing's good for you. In any case, our fall pledge drive is gearing up, and members should have gotten an email currently with some information, and we're happy to report that about 28% of our goal, we're about 28% there towards our goal of $80,000 of member pledges for the fiscal year. So you can submit your pledge at ethicalhumanistsociety.org/pledge or using the QR code up here. And while you're there, take just a minute and let us know about why. Why do you join? What's your why? If you're not yet a member but you're interested, we encourage you to come to the newcomers chat today. Our speaker series committee is always looking for experts on a wide range of topics to speak at our Sunday morning programs. And if you know someone who you think would be a good speaker, we encourage you to fill out a nomination form, again, code here, or the link in the email bulletin that went out, or reach out to our speakers committee, subcommittee chair, Andrea. Raise your hand. Back here. Oh, she's up. She was here. She'll be here. And actually, the speakers committee is meeting later today, about 15 minutes after the coffee hour, so you can come and find us too. Next Sunday, September 28th, our Community Day program will be an ethical dilemma discussion focusing on today's very topic of defending democracy. So we'll reflect on what we heard today from Khadine Bennett about building a firewall, and we'll explore what does defending democracy mean for us. We'll talk about actions we could take, who should take them and when, and we'll also explore the ethical parameters of our actions or our inaction. And then we'll take a chance also to look ahead to the next program on October 5th, and considering our perceptions of our own political, social, and cultural standing, and why or whether our perspectives matter. So speaking of that program, in 2 weeks from today, we'll be hearing from historian Kevin Schultz about why everyone hates white liberals, including white liberals. He says that how you define a white liberal is less a reflection of reality and more a Rorschach test, revealing your own anxieties. Schultz will share the fascinating history of the uses and abuses of modern liberalism. He will focus on how the enemies of liberalism have worked hard to denigrate it through attacks and caricature. And as described in his new book, the attacks have come from all sides, the right, the left, civil rights advocates, and more, and they've been incredibly effective. So he'll explain why so many Americans claim to believe in the principles of liberalism, including freedom, equality, and equal opportunity, while denying that they themselves are a liberal. So he says it's time for a new way to describe this kind of politics. For more details on upcoming Sunday morning programs or other activities, you can see our website, ethicalhumanistsociety.org. Connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for videos of past speakers and future streaming programs. And I was so glad you mentioned Keith Ellison from the great state of Minnesota, my home state, because I'm closing with a quote from Hubert H. Humphrey, who led the fight to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Equality means equality for all. No exceptions, no yes buts, no asterisk footnotes imposing limits. So join us for coffee and enjoy the rest of your day.